Hello, I'm Michael Chigani, and this is Straight Talk. With me today is Ronnie Tong. Ronnie Tong, an executive counselor. You have been on this show many times, but not recently. Thank you for being here. Now, Ronnie, when some viewers realized you were going to be on this show, they asked me to ask you this, and it's this. What changed you? Before you were a member of the Civic Party, you were part of the opposition camp. You voted against the political reform package in 2014, but now you're firmly in the establishment camp and you're a member of Carrie Lam's cabinet. What changed you?
Well, nothing changed me is the short answer, but I've been asked that question many, many times. And the long answer is that we're talking about completely different situations. In 2003, we were not against the passing of Article 23 legislation. We were against the way in which it would be passed. We were calling for what is referred to as the white paper consultation instead of the blue paper consultation. Now, the difference in color indicates that how extensive is the consultation being made. In 2003, there was no violence at all. There was
2014, I was also asking you.
Yeah, but let's talk about 2003. 2003, there was no violence. There was no one calling for independence of Hong Kong, liberation of Hong Kong. No one calling for U.S. Sending army to Hong Kong to rescue Hong Kong people. So the situation is very different. And not only that, we were all along talking about legislating in Hong Kong by the SAR government, by our LegCo. In fact, I've been working on this, my entire political career. Ever since I resigned from LegCo and from the Civic Party, I've been working very hard and trying to convince everybody that we need to do Article 23 legislation at the same time as we do political reform. I've been working on that very hard. But now we're facing a situation that neither Hong Kong people or the SR government or the central government has got any choice. We were faced with a very dire and urgent situation, a lot of violence going on, petrol bombs all over the place, people waving United States flags, calling for the liberation of Hong Kong, people calling for US to send their Marines, their army to Hong Kong to rescue Hong Kong people. So there is definitely a very urgent need for legislation to plug the legal loophole to prevent harm being done to the entire country. Not only that, if you look at LegCo, it is not functioning. It is totally dysfunctional. Just electing a chairman of the House Committee took more than 7 months. And even before that, you can see that LegCo is not functional. You can't pass any law which is controversial, let alone laws which touches upon the interrelationship between Hong Kong and Beijing. If you look ahead, if the Democrats would get more than the majority, would become the majority in LegCo, all the more there is no possibility of that being enacted a law under Article 23.
That's an interesting point, though. When you say if the Democrats get the majority in LegCo in September's election, it'll become even more dysfunctional. Do you think that this national security law intends to stop the Democrats from getting a majority?
No, I don't think so. I don't think that's the way to do it. And I don't think
if they win fair and square, then
I don't think it's a crime for anybody to run in LegCo and then putting forward a political viewpoint which is at odds with the political stand of either the SAR government or the central government. I don't believe that. But as I say, if you look forward and try to see if there is any possibility at all that the Hong Kong Legislative Council can tackle the issue of Article 23, I would say none. When I look ahead, I don't think it could be done in the next 5 to 10 years. Incidentally, I noticed that a veteran Democrat had recently said that Hong Kong should legislate under Article 23. But I see no one standing up and say, yes, I agree. not from the Pan-Democrats.
The pro-establishment camp, now they have enough votes to get it passed.
No, I'm not sure it's whether or not you have enough votes. It's a question of, electrical being stopped from functioning. Look at the way in which the chairman of the House Committee was being elected. The pro-government camp has a majority right now.
Yes,
and yet you can still see the Legislative Council not functioning at all.
Now, you mentioned earlier about people calling for independence, people calling for the U.S. Marines to come in. But do you really seriously think that the U.S. Marines are going to come and rescue Hong Kong?
Are you saying that we should wait until the Marines?
Slogans.
Are you saying that you should wait until the Marines are on our shores to do anything?
Are you seriously, Ronnie, think that that's going to happen? You think
No,
the
I don't
Americans
think it would happen.
will do that?
But, in matters of national security, you should not allow this to continue to grow into actual fact. When you talk about national security, for example, when you talk about treason, you talk about subversion, you don't wait until the fact of treason or the fact of subversion actually happening. All the laws all over the world are there to prevent it from happening.
But China is a superpower, Ronnie. If the American Marines come to Hong Kong, there's going to be war between U.S. and China. I'm sure the U.S. government is not going to start a war with China for the sake of Hong Kong.
You're being very optimistic.
You seriously think the U.S. will start a war with China over Hong Kong?
You ask a lot of people, people may have different views, particularly with Donald Trump, at the helm.
Now, if I'm holding an American flag and shouting independence, but if I do it peacefully, should the security law allow that?
I don't know. You have to wait and see. The blueprint.
But what do you think? If I'm out there protesting peacefully...
If you advocate violence...
No, peacefully.
No, let me finish. If you advocate violence, the law should prevent you from doing so.
Agree.
If you advocate armed conflict, it should prevent you from doing so. If you advocate doing harm to the country and you have a work plan to do it, a manifesto to do it, then you should be prevented by legislation. Anything else, I hope, is in the realm of freedom of speech and should not be touched.
So I ask you again, if I'm out in the streets holding whatever flag, saying I want independence, but you say it peacefully, and I oppose the national security law, and you say it peacefully, should that be allowed?
Oppose the national security law is one thing. Calling for foreign intervention is another thing. And let's look at, the national security law all over the world. It doesn't jump from, life imprisonment to scot-free. It doesn't jump like that. And you can have legislation which prevent you from doing it without putting you in jail. And there are conduct which would ensure that you would be put in jail if you went too far. So you're talking about a whole spectrum of conduct to be regulated by legislation. And I don't know what the national security law is going to be like. I hope it would not infringe upon the freedoms and core values of the people in Hong Kong. But we must understand all the freedoms and core values that we are used to have a limit. If you look at the ICCPR, the International Covenant of Civil and Political Rights, which has often been referred to as a Human Rights Charter, it talks about all these rights are subject to legal restraint on the ground of national security. And not every nation has an issue of national security, but such legislations are there to prevent this unhappy situation from developing into reality.
Okay. Now I've got 2 minutes.
So it's all about deterrent rather than punishment.
I've got 2 minutes before the break. Let me ask you this: you said neither one of us know the details of this law. Okay. Now it could come out this weekend when the NPC meets. Tell me, how do you want it to look? You don't know what it contains. What do you hope it to be? What kind of language it uses, how tough it should be, how soft it should be?
Well, national security offences are serious offences. If you look at the Hong Kong Crimes Ordinance, which talks about treason and subversion, which was enacted by the colonial government, by the way, by the British colonial government, maximum sentence is for life. In a lot of countries, the maximum sentence is death. So we're talking about serious offences. So we're not talking about the ordinary public order offences. So because it's a serious offence, I want it to be defined very clearly, articulated to the greatest detail, so that people will know what to do, that whether what they're doing is going to be all right or is going to be criminal. Judges should know how to apply the law, in a just way and seen to be just. So if you ask me, if I'm the legislator, if I'm going to write up the law, I would certainly write up in the way that I just explained to you, the way that I see it, that you can't advocate violence, you can't advocate armed conflict, you cannot have organization and work plan to make it happen. Other than that, you should be allowed to be on your way.
I've got to take a quick break. See you soon. Don't go away. Thanks for staying with us. This is Straight Talk. With me is Ronnie Tong. Ronnie Tong, you're an executive councillor and you're also a barrister. Now, you said if you were to write this law, you would make sure that because secession and sedition and all those things are such serious offences, national security, that the law has to be very, very clear so that you know whether...
Under our system.
Sorry, go on.
Under our system, under the common law system.
All right. So now, people worry because in mainland China, laws are not as clear-cut as they are under common law, right? Sometimes there's some areas that are vague. The Justice Secretary, Teresa Chang, said that you cannot expect that it will follow exactly the common law system. But we here in Hong Kong, we do follow the common law
Well, let
system.
me explain a little bit more, because I feel that a lot of people don't have an in-depth understanding of what we're talking about. Now, there are two legal systems in the world. There's the continental legal system and there's the common law system. The continental legal system is being practiced by 2/3 of the countries in the world, well over 150 countries. Common law countries, about 1/3, right? The significant difference between a continental legal system and common law legal system is that while both would use written law, the law being written up in a statute, right? Under the continental system, quite often they would use it to write up the law in a very wide sweeping way, deal with broad principles, and allow more room for judges in applying the law to use their own judgment to deal with the situation in front of them.
Which do you prefer?
No, let's not talk about it. It's not meaningful to talk about that. Both systems are perfectly okay, right? Both have good points and bad points. Now, under the common law system, when you deal with the written law, normally you write up the law in a very detailed way, and judges have very little room to deviate from the written law, right? Now, that's the difference between the two.
That's the system that you practice as a barrister.
That's right. Now, and I think a lot of the concern are justified, because if you look at, for example, the national security law on the mainland, you put it on the table and put it in side by side with, say, for instance, the crimes ordinance, and you compare the two, you see that a vastly different way of approach. In the crimes ordinance, every single detail is being spelled out, very articulated as to what situations you would be infringing the law. But if you look at the mainland law, it's very wide sweeping. It talks about general duty of the citizen and so on and so forth. Now, when the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress write up a law for Hong Kong and put it into Annex 3, it would become part of the laws of Hong Kong. And on this particular incident, they are saying that it would immediately be enforced, right, and not going through the LegCo, understandably, because LegCo is dysfunctional, as I say. Now, that being the case, lawyers like myself are concerned that if you use the the civil law way approach in writing up the statute, people in Hong Kong may not know whether something they're doing would be legal or criminal, and judges may not know how to deal with it. So for practical reason, when you come to deal with criminal offences, you should articulate it in a way which is as close to the common law system as possible.
So you're in fact saying you hope that they will do that?
Simply for practical reasons. You know, it's not a question of faith, it's not a question of which legal system is better, it's just for practical reasons people need to know exactly where they stand.
Do you expect that will happen, that the central government will understand what you've just said?
I think they do. I think they do. Because I've said this.
Otherwise, how would you defend a person?
I'm not just saying this to you. I've been saying it, for the last 2 weeks to everybody that I meet, and I say, the feedback that I get is that they do understand it, right? Because they do understand the difference between, enforcing the law immediately and putting a national law in Annex 3 and allow us to do it in our way, like the national anthem law, which is a very good example, right? They could have put the national anthem law into Annex 3 and enforce it immediately, but they didn't. And they allow Hong Kong to go through the legislative process. So that if you take the national anthem ordinance, put it alongside with the national anthem law on the mainland, again, you can immediately see the difference, the approach. Now, this difference is not lost with the people that I talk to, certainly not lost with the Secretary for Justice. So when she answered the point raised by the Bar Council, she was simply saying, as I understand it, I may be wrong, you should ask her directly, I understand it, she's saying you cannot expect the entire law to be written in a way, in a common law legal system way. But I do understand that she said when it comes to the criminal law part, then it needs to be very carefully drafted, very detailed, so that people would know how to enforce it.
Well, we'll probably know what happens this weekend, if it happens this weekend. Now, let me just ask you something else. A lot of big corporations in Hong Kong, like HSBC, were asked or pressured to openly support
I'm not sure they were pressured. I've not seen any.
Well, they were asked, whatever the word you want to use, and they had to come out openly and say they support the law. Do you think that's the right way to do things? Because businesses have always tried to stay away from politics in Hong Kong.
Well, I don't know whether they're forced or not. You should ask them. But, I don't see anything wrong for people coming up to say, I'm against this law or I'm for this law. The whole community in Hong Kong has been doing just that. I'm sorry.
Should legislative councillors be allowed? Because, again, there was also another suggestion that all candidates for LegCo must say they support this law because it is going to be in Annex 3 of the Basic Law, right? So then they must support this law. If they don't, then they'll be disqualified.
I don't share that view. People oppose a piece of legislation for a number of reasons.
Right.
They may oppose it because they don't believe in the system, in which case they're not safeguarding the Basic Law, therefore they shouldn't be a legislator. But people may be against the law for other reasons. For the reason, for example, they want to see it, more properly done. They want to see all the criminal sections or criminal conduct is being defined very carefully, taking a view which is very much like mine. I think those people should not be treated as not agreeing or supporting the Basic Law.
What's wrong, Ronnie, with a legislative councillor saying, I don't really support this national security law, but if it is passed, I will have to obey it.
No,
is something wrong with that?
Nothing wrong with that.
Then should they be disqualified for saying that?
No, that's what I say. I don't share that view.
So they shouldn't be disqualified?
Well, I don't share that view, but if people are being disqualified, it's, first of all, not a decision made by me. It's going to be a decision made by the returning officer, and he or she would have to state the reasons, state the facts, supporting her decision one way or another.
Okay, now, another thing that I think Secretary of Security John Lee said in an interview recently that there is foreign interference with the protests last year, and he actually named Taiwan and the United States. Now, this accusation of foreign interference goes back to Occupy Central. I remember Siwa Leung saying that there is foreign interference, and I asked him which country, and he couldn't name it. Up until now, I mean, I don't think anybody's seen actual proof of foreign. And what exactly is foreign interference?
No, true. But you see, you know, American and Taiwanese politicians openly supporting what is happening in Hong Kong, and went so far as to say that Hong Kong will be punished because of what is happening. And I think it's a natural inference from there that there is some
that is
kind
foreign
of
interference?
No,
promoting
some
democracy?
kind of connection and some kind of interference. I don't know, and I think that is why that you know, there should be a law allowing people to investigate these issues. Just as in America, people are accusing Russia of interfering with the election process in the United States. Where is the evidence? No, but still there should be investigation, and I think Donald Trump has been doctored by that.
Well,
that investigation for the entire period of his administration.
He was impeached.
So it's nothing strange.
No, he was impeached for that, and then he was found not guilty, right, by the Congress. So then, if there is foreign interference, why not have an inquiry in Hong Kong and find out where it's coming from?
No, that's why
Carrie Lam refuses.
That's why you need a law to do that, don't you?
No, once you have an independent inquiry to see whether there's foreign interference.
Well, don't you need a law to enable that such an investigation can be carried out in the first place?
No, the law can only come into.
If you look at America, the last count, I don't know, they have something like 11 national security laws enacted in America, affecting all sorts of conduct.
You know, people say that a lot, and I was there when they passed the Patriot Act, but then they had come under attack, 9/11. I mean, that's a huge, huge difference.
Well, but they have national security law even before 9/11.
Sure.
I think after 9/11, the legislation just become more and more draconian.
Okay, I've got one last question. You've said previously that the laws that we have now, the colonial laws, if you put them all together, they could become a national security law. Remember you saying that?
Yeah, I say that.
What changed your mind?
No, I haven't changed my mind. I still say that it should be done, but the Democrats are saying that it lost its effectiveness because it's too old. And despite my urging, I haven't seen any action or prosecution being brought by the Secretary for Justice. Okay. Maybe she agrees with the Democrats. I don't know.
All right. I've got to end the show. Thank you very much. See you next time. Good evening. Thank you, Ronnie.